All right. Good morning, everyone. We are going to get started. Thanks so much for joining us this morning. My name is Dana Slowinski, and I am co-owner of Family Recovery Centers. And we're so excited to have our November webinar be with Maria Campobasso with Rosecrans. First, I'm just going to do a quick overview of Family Recovery Centers for those of you that are not familiar. We are an intensive evening outpatient program for adolescents and for their parents. We have locations in Lake Bluff, Hoffman Estates, St. Charles, and then our new location coming very soon in the Plano, Yorkville area. We work with a wide range of adolescents. So adolescents struggling with maladaptive behaviors across the board, self-injury, substance use, some disordered eating, depression, anxiety, bipolar disorder, ADHD. We utilize a DBT-based approach and also incorporate other modalities to really individualize care. We have two program components that I like to highlight. One is our 24/7 on-call. So our staff, our clinicians are available to both the patients and their parents 24/7 to help skills coaching in the moment, whether that's walking into school, whether that's late at night and they're struggling with urges. We can really help them, skills coach them in the moment. And then our parent component, which really ties into what Maria will be talking about today. Our parents are involved in treatment 50% of the time. So they're actually on site 2 of the 4 evenings with their child, and they're learning their skills right along with their child. And then they're also doing their own work. So we're really wrapping around looking at the family dynamic and wrapping around that whole family system. That is us in a very quick nutshell. We do have 2 other highlights. We are very excited to welcome Dr. Brad Pector, who is a psychiatrist, to our team. He is non-direct patient care, so he's consulting. He's working with our multidisciplinary staffings. So we're very excited to introduce him. And then we also have an individual component that we are rolling out and really focused on behavioral chain analysis. So focusing on making change within some of the behaviors that are occurring throughout the treatment stay with these adolescents. Again, in a nutshell. So if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to myself or Ryan. And with that, I just want to say we are very grateful for our community partnerships and our relationship with Rosecrans and specifically with Maria. We have a great referral, system back and forth, and Rosecrans has been wonderful as far as, working with us in different levels of care. So Maria, with that, I will turn it over to you.
Thanks, guys. I'm really excited to be here as well. I love working with family recovery centers and just love all of you guys. So excited to hear about the changes and Dr. Pector coming your way. So very exciting. So as Dana mentioned, I'm Maria with Rosecrans. I've been in the field for a long time, but have recently, well, not recently, but have become particularly passionate about families in recovery. So at Rosecrans, I have had a myriad of roles, but one of my favorites is facilitating our parent support group called Parent Cafe. And it has really challenged me, inspired me, and given me just kind of a lot of hope, but really reinforced this really reinforced in me the need to treat families as a whole, which, as Dana mentioned, it's one of the reasons why I love family recovery centers, because it's not just about the patient or client alone, it is the families doing the work as well. So we'll get started. The objectives today are, hopefully all of these, gain an understanding of family systems. I imagine that the majority of individuals who are on this call really probably already know family systems. So I only have an hour, so we'll talk really briefly about this. My hope is that this can be somewhat interactive, because I do believe that, I imagine that there's a lot of callers or participants on this call or this Zoom that work with families, have a lot of experiences, and I would love to get your insight and feedback, as well as I consider you guys experts and having the expertise. So please feel free to utilize the chats. I'm going to ask some questions. Dana's going to help me kind of facilitate what those questions are, but feel free to ask questions as we go. So, why the roller coaster? I am big on patterns, and so many of the families that I work with, they describe their experience as a roller coaster. I'm not sure if you guys hear that, but I feel like describing it in this way for them increases their understandings of the highs and lows of when you are when you have a loved one in recovery struggling with mental health or substance use, using those maladaptive coping skills that Dana mentioned that FRC treats. But when you are a family in recovery, you have lows, you have highs, there are exciting parts, there are scary parts, and there is even joy. And I think that one of the things that we have to help families do is we have to help them maintain hope. Hope is a concept that we tell our, the loved one, the person who is struggling with substance use or mental health. We try and instill hope in them as well. And I feel like there is this parallel process that happens with parents and families as well. So as we try to continually instill hope in the clients that we treat with mental health or substance use, I think it's also important to instill that hope in the families that we treat. This quote is from, and I'm always going to butcher the name, and Dean DeFinis. He is an author and a blogger, and he has a son who is in recovery from substance use disorder. And he's the founder. He says recovery is an ongoing process for both the individual and his or her own family. In recovery, there's hope, and hope is a wonderful thing. So Dean's story is not unlike any other family when you have a person who's struggling with substance use disorder. He was helping support his son who was struggling. And basically what he learned that he so badly wanted to help his son. But he soon recognized that in order for him to help his son, he really had to help himself. And that was the turning point for him. He is the founder of a blog, My Life as 3D. He's a lead advocate for Heroes in Recovery, and he's a member of the National Parent Partners through partnership at drugfree.org. And he's just a great resource and inspiration for families. But again, I think the thing that speaks to me the most is that in all of his efforts to help his son, the catalyst was him getting help and support for himself. So, one of the questions that I wanted to bring out to the group is, what is the reaction, or what do families say to you when you tell them they need to do their own work? What are some of the things that they say when you're asking them, or, kind of like, I think about, with Data talking about this 50-50 commitment from families and clients, like, what are some of the reactions that you get from parents? Let me see. Because I can tell you, what we see, Rosecrans also offers, we have a mandatory component for our, intensive outpatient for adolescents where parents have to attend. And it reminds me of, like a stand-up comedian, Jim Gaffigan, where, they're trying to convince him to sign up for like the grocery store membership. And he says, well, I can't go to a lot of meetings. I get that all the time from our, I get that all the time from our parents. They're like, I don't know if I can make it. Why do I have to go? I'm not the one with the problem. He's the one who has to do all the work. These are some of the things that I hear. Yep, looking at the chat now. I don't have time to help myself. That one is huge. We hear that all the time. Even kind of just, they usually say they simply don't want to do that. I do think that the scheduling issues, they can be legit. But I know that especially with platforms like this, we have definitely tried to reduce some of those barriers, but they can put those scheduling issues as barriers. The feeling judged, then I need to see them put in the effort. Those are all great examples of the things that they say, right? I mean, we are one family that we were working with in particular refused, we like it when they put on their camera. They refused to turn on their camera because there was just so much shame around needing to put their child in treatment, put their loved one in treatment, and they did not want anybody to know. They did not want anybody to know that they were seeking help, or we always say they're making such a hard decision. I don't know, Dana, if you want to chime in on some of the challenges that you face since you have such a robust family program.
Yeah, so we this is one thing that we, really work as a team on, and also, from the beginning, just kind of commitment strategies with the families, because a lot of what is being written in this Q&A, we get, every single day. And we just say from the beginning, okay, so what are the barriers? What are those barriers? And let's kind of break them down. Is it scheduling? Is it that you have, other children that, is it your work schedule? What is it? And then how do we kind of find a middle ground? We obviously want them to participate as much as possible, and we sometimes will find a middle ground where they might, be one day in person, the other day on Zoom because of scheduling. Or we try to find, we try to show them that it's not all black and white too. But then we also find that once they get involved in that group process and hear other families kind of say, share their struggles as well, that families tend to have a little more commitment to that group process, and it helps for others to say, yeah, this is hard, this is difficult, and we're making it a priority. So we really rely heavily on those commitment strategies the minute they walk in the door of let's break down those barriers and see what we can, work together on.
And I think that is not that COVID had many blessings, but I do feel like COVID and Zoom and using virtual meetings and that does allow for so much flexibility. So yes, breaking down those barriers, helping them just recognize that, and we all know this, that their loved one, and there are tons of statistics out there about, like the success rates of those or healing of those that have family involvement is huge. So family involvement is necessary and super important. But yeah, it's working with families is continuous. Dana,
And
were you gonna
Maria,
add?
yeah, I was just gonna say this last comment. I want to help my child. That's what's really important. I don't need the help. I think there's so much to unpack there, right? That I think as far as like once you're in the programs, I think the parents are a little more open, at least to seeing that whole family system. And that's why it's so important to really wrap around the whole system. And when those light bulb moments go on in the parent's head, when they say, oh my goodness, look at my role within that system, and if I can work on that role, then it actually is affecting my child and affecting the whole all of the dynamics. I think that's where change, really like sustainable change, can happen too.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I think that comment was from Trish Flaherty, who I think I know. So thanks for that
Yes,
comment.
as do we.
Um, So, and that's super important in terms of, so much of the topic that we're talking about today. So, if families are making a very hard decision, Rosecrans has a continuum of care from detox residential for adolescents and adults. I think families who are making a super hard decision, it's a super hard decision sending your loved one to treatment. It's a super hard decision to go to treatment. And so the parents that we are working with, they are reporting so many feelings. We talked a lot about those, or those were mentioned in the chat. It's not only just there is shame, but there's grief and loss. I hear so often, parents say, like, I just want my kid, like, I see on Facebook, everyone's going to prom. I see that they're graduating and my kid's not. There's so many feelings that come out. They just want their kids to graduate high school. They feel like that's the marker that's going to change things. If I could just get them to that point. So part of our job is helping them recognize what I oftentimes refer to as this roller coaster ride, that their feelings are normal. I mean, they're going to have those wins as well, right? They are going to have the wins of when they go into, when they get into recovery, they start to work, their loved one starts to work a program, that feels really good. But there's also this level of, that I oftentimes hear described as this trauma that they experience from when their person was actively using or highly symptomatic as far as their mental health or depression. So, but we helping our families recognize that what they are experiencing is normal, that we can normalize that for them, that they are not alone, and also this really important component of self-care, which I think Dana mentioned as well, or someone in the chat had mentioned as well. Like, I can't take care of myself, I got to take care of my child. But we'll talk more about self-care later. I'm curious to see what you guys, how you guys suggest, or what you suggest for the parents that you work with or families that you work with. So when I work with families, I oftentimes describe it as like cogs in a wheel. the family system works in this way. So when one wheel changes, the whole system has to change, right? In order to get the family back to functioning. Functioning isn't necessarily like healthy functioning. I think that that's the difficult part sometimes when dealing with families, is helping them to recognize that, like, how, that it's not just about the loved one and the problematic behavior that we're seeing in the loved one, but it's about the family system and the family's level of functioning as a whole. This is a really kind of, we have to not tiptoe around it, but be sensitive around it, because this is not to blame the family members. Rosecrans uses a lot of 12-step. And so Al-Anon is one of the support groups that we can sometimes recommend. And so it's that 3 C's: you didn't cause it, you can't cure it, and you can't control it. But what we help families see, and we help them recognize how they are, how they can contribute to their loved one's wellness. And we have to identify some of the patterns and possibly the way that they are, unknowingly contributing to the loved one's illness. So there are a number of treatment models when working with mental health or substance use disorder that focus on family systems. We're only going to look at 2 of them, and it's going to be really briefly. So if you feel like you're an expert in any one of these, chime in with the chat. Feel free to jump in if you feel like there's just like really important key points. I'm going to touch on 2 of the ones, 2 of my favorites, just kind of to be mindful of time. And the chat in there is that, from Georgine, is that FA is a great resource for family, and we recommend that as well. It is a really great resource for family. So the first I'll talk about family systems theory, which is, established by Dr. David Bowen. And again, I know that you guys probably learned this in school. The key components of this model is that every member of the family is a part of an emotional dynamic in which the symptom or the difficulty gets stuck at the individual level, but it actually needs to be addressed at the system level. So this is where, if one of the family, like a family member, can do better in managing like their own reactivity, learning their patterns, and if we do that, then the whole system can change. I am going to briefly show one of these video. It's one that I love, and I oftentimes show it to parents, but it just helps them kind of see. Let me see if I can. I'm going to stop sharing and then share again and find this video. Bear with me 1 second. I apologize. Oh. Okay. So I guess I didn't process this. I'm so sorry. This is it. Okay. Can you see the screen? It says mind.
Yes, it looks
Okay.
good.
Let me know if you can hear it.
Okay, I can't hear.
You can't hear it?
I cannot. I don't know, Ryan, can you hear that?
I cannot either.
You can't. Hold on. Okay. Well, I guess we won't watch the video, but if you have a minute to watch it, it's a really interesting, easy, simple way to explain to families. And let me know if you can see. Can you see the slideshow?
Yes. So just going back to the presenter view.
That's what I need to do now.
Yes.
Okay.
Someone did just make a comment. Make sure you're sharing the sound when you're watching the video.
Oh.
You want to try again, or?
I'm so sorry, guys. Technical difficulties. Let me try again. And so I would share sound.
There should be a little box that says share sound in the bottom corner. Before you share your screen. This
Okay.
is comments from Christina, who's helping us
I
out.
appreciate it.
It's a team
I'm
effort
so
this
sorry.
morning.
Okay, so before I share, I need to say share sound. There, yay. Thank goodness.
Thank goodness for the team, right?
Yes, this is why this is
Awesome.
totally a team approach.
Family systems theory states that individuals cannot be understood in isolation from one another, but must be seen as part of a family system. We are biologically social organisms, and our development is intricately linked to the other organisms we grow up with, our family members. The family is like its own emotional unit, and it's the nature of the family that its members are intensely connected. As the family system grows and develops, unconscious rules and routines can develop as well, as each member of the family system is expected to respond to other members in a certain way according to his or her role. The reason why each family member takes on a particular role is so that the system can create a status quo or equilibrium in order to function. If one person in the system is sick or is struggling, the whole system is affected. But often the family system will adapt and find a way to maintain equilibrium even with the sick or struggling person playing their role. The danger here is that if a family system has created a status quo or equilibrium with the sick person playing their role, it might be difficult for the sick person to get better, as that change will affect the balance of the whole system. Often, a person struggling with a mental health or behavioral issue will not be able to get better unless all of the parts of the family system change a bit to allow for the person's new role as healthy and well. Of course, family systems come in all shapes and sizes with all different kinds of makeups. And the good news is, when we work with the whole system, we can have a long-lasting, multi-generational positive effect on the family. If your loved one needs treatment and/or therapy, scout out and work with therapists or treatment centers that use family systems approaches. Especially if your loved one is dealing with an addiction issue, there are family support groups such as Al-Anon or CODA that can be very helpful. I actually recommend these programs for everyone who wants to strengthen their own mental health as well as strengthen their families.
Sorry, I'm just going to stop it and then share, because that's just like more recommendations for that. But again, another kind of push to have families, attend some of these support groups, which obviously, like encourage greatly. So let me get back to my page. And again, I apologize for the technical difficulties. But I like to show that because, again, this is something that with families, helping them just kind of, again, recognize their role, recognize how they're contributing, and then how they can change that, and helping them understand, and I'll say this continuously because it's like my favorite thing to say, but helping them understand patterns. I'm really big on recognizing patterns. We probably know this, and I feel like even bringing this up dates me like tremendously, but the family dysfunctional roles was described to me back in grad school, and I still feel like they are applicable today. Obviously, they can change kind of a little bit as far as the name. We obviously want some to change some of the use some person-centered language, but these roles I feel like are extremely important in explaining these. I have found a lot of success when explaining these, especially in like group processes with families, things of that sort. It really kind of creates this light bulb for families, for individuals in recovery. And this really helps them kind of understand that dynamic of like that cogs in a wheel or the mobile, and how when one person changes, how it impacts kind of the other. So I still talk about these things. I would love to know if you guys still utilize these things. Again, I really probably am kind of dating myself, but I still find the family dysfunctional roles to be so helpful when treating families. The next kind of approach to family systems or to treating families is the brief strategic family therapy. This is probably one of my favorites too. It uses a strengths-based approach to transform problematic family behaviors to constructive interaction. So it's BSFT is a combination of the structural family therapy and then strategic family therapy I don't think that this is going to be new information for most of you, as it's been around for about 45 years. But I do love it. I feel like it comes from a very growth and love perspective. The concept behind is also that families change because they, if there's anger, they help family systems recognize that there's actually love behind the anger. And it helps that kind of love be able to flourish. And when treating or using BSFT, the focus is primarily on the interaction, and it makes it more manageable. And it feels like it's more manageable for the therapist, clinician, and then for the families as well. I imagine that when you guys when you have clients that kind of come in, when you have clients come in, they want to talk about the content so much, right? Like, won't go to school, won't get out of bed, continuously arguing, I can't get them to do anything. And when we pile all that stuff on, it can get like really overwhelming. And so the goal of BSFT is to help families recognize just kind of within the interaction. There is a lot of like the interaction when things are going well and the interaction when things are not going well. And so we help families really kind of recognize how they are interacting with each other, changing those interactions from like anger to love, negative to positive, habitual to repetitive to appropriate and in the moment, right? Again, this is huge in terms of the patterns. And so like, I always believe like when you know better, you do better. And so those family interactional patterns, they are diagnosed in a way that's like maladaptive and adaptive behavior. And the hope, this is one that is, again, brief and strategic. So short term, believe sessions are anywhere from like 12 to 16 sessions. And a lot of times it's based on, that is based on the severity of what's going on in the family. But it's having the therapist recognize these issues that are happening within that family interaction primarily. As I mentioned, we talk so much about like the patterns we see in families. So these are just some of the ones like in my parent support group that I see. And my group is great. We can kind of call each other out on it. Not so much me, because again, this is a support group that I merely facilitate, but they get called out on some of the patterns that they utilize, the withdrawing, finding distractions, lack of consistency in the application of rules and consequences. We all know that. I mean, I'm guilty of that myself. The consistency is key. There's also these components of, a pattern that we can see is lecturing, looking to explain or solve the problem. The identified person or the loved one, like they likely know what's going on. They likely know that what they're doing isn't appropriate, but having a parent or a spouse kind of come in and lecture on that isn't really going to be effective. Parents can oftentimes have their own addiction. The constant worrying is also, a pattern, because with that worrying, I think that like, I always think of anxiety as like hot potato, like someone said this to me once, we don't want it, so we give it away, right? And so worrying being a component of that anxiety. And so we just kind of pass that along throughout our family members. It's important to inform parents that they don't own their child's choices, but they do own their own. So those family interactional problems that there have been these family interactional problems that have been identified and linked to adolescent acting out. So, these are some of them. Some of the other ones are like the parent under or over involvement, poor quality of parent-child communication. That's a big one for me. I always talk about creating the safe space for individuals to come. When you have someone who is struggling with substance use disorder, actively using, there is, and this is not mine, I steal these from everyone, but there is a window of willingness. If the identified person or the loved one does not feel like they can come to you or come to that parent at the time of need, because because it's not really a safe space to be able to do that, we lose that window of willingness. They're not going to come to us, right? If they don't come to us for the easy things, they're not going to come to us for those hard things as well. So if parents are in that interaction are, again, the lecturing, they are angry and yelling, about the little things like you push in your chair, did you pick up your laundry, did you do those things? Like if we are creating this, like we are not creating the safe space for loved ones to come to us, they're not, we're going to miss that window of willingness. So communication is key when working with families. So again, I had to do it really kind of briefly about what, and again, I would really love to kind of have a conversation about this, but what does all of this mean? And not so much like that, what is BSFT and like the David Bowen family systems theory. I mean, the bottom line is that like we have to help families continue to support, we have to support families, we have to give them the tools, because we know that family engagement increases desired outcome for both mental health and substance use. We have to send a message to families that this is just not about the identified person, right? And that's really kind of my reinforcing message. Like, so a lot of times when when a person comes into treatment, right, the magnifying glass is like zoomed in on that identified person. But we really have to like pull that magnifying glass out and recognize that it's just so many things going around it. I think it's like why historically we have seen people like do well in that bubble, or they do well when they're in a residential treatment program, but then as soon as they go home, they relapse into old behaviors. And again, it's not to put any blame on families, but that if that home environment doesn't change, we just put them right back where they were. And it's just obviously just way more difficult. So one of the biggest things that we have to do as clinicians in our programs is we have to help families get support and recognize they need to set boundaries. Helping them, I always think that there's this like difference between rules and boundaries. I don't know if you guys have this, but like we have rules, like we have household rules that we have, but then I also have boundaries, and boundaries are what we set for ourselves, not for our loved one. So I think about Oprah, was it Oprah or Maya Angelou or someone saying like forgiveness is a gift you give yourself. I think that boundaries are a gift you give yourself as well. When working with families in terms of setting boundaries, there is that like equation, right? Like if you do this, then I will do this. Sometimes those pronouncements or those really hard and fast boundaries really set families up to fail. Because families, as an example, like if you use, I'm going to kick you out. Well, if I'm not willing or if I'm unable to do that, to actually ask my child to leave, like I've not set a boundary. I've just let my loved one know that I don't really mean what I say. So they can kind of walk all over me. I think, again, we have to teach family members that, instead of making a pronouncement like, if you use, I'm going to kick you out, we have to help the family member recognize like how they are feeling, and then kind of what they need based on that feeling. So, if it is like, I cannot have you in my home because when I see you using this way, I don't sleep. My anxiety is increased. I get really worried. I cannot watch this. And then moving in that direction, again, of having families kind of recognize like that boundary is for them. And a boundary is, again, like something that I can control. So I think about an example of a spouse, right? The spouse wants to set a boundary, like you can't use in my home. But that spouse can't necessarily guarantee that that person is going to leave when they drink. In fact, most oftentimes they don't leave. But what that spouse can do is they themselves can leave. And again, that brings up a belly full of feelings about so many things. Like, why should I have to leave? Like, they're the one with the problem. This is going to show that I've conceded. Those kinds of thoughts can come up. But like, really, like we have seen, or I have seen this dynamic shift where like in this particular situation, the spouse leaves and eventually the identified person or the individual with the substance use disorder recognizes like, oh man, like they are meaning what they say. They're going to leave every time I drink. And it can shift that dynamic. I think, again, when we think of like families who are, experiencing loved ones or have loved ones who are detoxing, we aren't gonna like minimize the consequences. Like, I'm not gonna come over and I'm not gonna come over and bring you chicken noodle soup when you're detoxing. But what I am gonna do is I'll bring a bucket and just make sure you're safe, and I'll just remain neutral. But I'm not going to, take care of you, kind of thing. One of the things with boundaries that we know of, and you probably see this all the time, I see it personally, professionally, that as soon as you set a boundary, the person that you set the boundary with will push up against them just to see how firm they are or how much you mean that, like how much you mean it. So it's important to help families also recognize that when they are setting those boundaries, that initially it's going to be hard. I think of a 2-year-old toddler who's throwing the tantrum. We just got a puppy. I think of that puppy who is barking. If I give into that barking dog, I'm really just reinforcing the behavior. The same thing is true for boundaries as well. But helping families manage those expectations is huge, that they're going to push against those boundaries. We talked about Al-Anon already earlier. So I think like recognizing and recognizing one of the things in Al-Anon that I really love are those 3 C's. And I can't reiterate those enough. I didn't cause it, I can't control it, and I can't cure it. We all know that families, especially those with substance use disorder and even mental health, like they go through their own level of trauma when dealing with a loved one in recovery. They hear all the time from the patients, clients, parents that I work with that, when that phone rings, their heart drops like every single time. Al-Anon is a great support, as already mentioned. CODO, which was brought up in the video. We have a parent support group. Obviously, FRC has a great family components as well, but that support group, like the power of Me Too, and I know you guys all know that that's like a Brene Brown thing, but the power of Me Too is just so powerful. So I love my parent cafe and that support group, but it really has nothing to do with me. It has everything to do with the parents that are in that group helping one another. So another key thing that we as therapists can help our families do is recognize that they don't have to do this alone. Again, the same kind of parallel thing that we tell those that are in recovery. They don't have to do this alone. As I mentioned, there are so many parallels between the identified person's journey in recovery and the family's journey. So, question like, how do we help families? Obviously, as I mentioned, they need to get their own support group. We have to help them understand how to set boundaries and then increase that communication. I think, and that goes back to some of that family systems theories and the BSFT, that communication, understanding the interaction. There is a great book, and again, it has nothing to do with substance use disorder or mental health, but like the book is called How to Talk So Kids Will Listen. And it's these strategies of how to get, these school-age kids to, how to get them to kind of be receptive to some of the things that we have to say. But, again, it's, we do have a lot of resistant loved ones who don't want to change. But as Dana mentioned, like that, when they go to those groups, it really is transformative for them in their own recovery journey. I think another way that we help families is with self-care. And this is, again, where I would love to see. The book is called How to Talk So Kids Will Listen. Off the top of my head, I don't know the author. It's my Audible, but I can definitely get that. But it's a book that's been around for a while. It's pretty simple concepts. How to Talk So Kids Will Listen. But different kind of strategies. All right, so I'm going to bring this back to the group, and I'm trying to be mindful of time. So self-care, again, typical concept for parents. I'm wondering if you guys have any thoughts or how you recommend or how you convince your family members to utilize, participate, engage in any type of self-care. When my, Rosecrans has our residential program, and they, at that point, automatically get invited to Parent Cafe. When that parent shows up in our group, the first thing that my group says to them is self-care. I even have a woman that I deem as my self-care queen. She is the one who will say it, talk about it, and that is just like a foreign concept. So wondering how you guys kind of strategize or help, and please put this in the chat, how you help your families participate in self-care. What are the things that you suggest? Because again, we hear a lot of things like, I can't go and do that. My kid is in treatment right now. Like, why would I go and, do self-care? I can't, I have no time for any of that. These are some of the things that I see. So I'm wondering what some of the responses you are, that you hear, that you hear from parents, but then also like, what suggestions do you make for them as far as self-care? Because this sheet has, kind of forgiving yourself, that's a loaded one. Putting yourself first, what does that even mean, right? For a person who's just kind of in crisis, saying no, ooh, these are all tough ones. I think we need to think about this on a smaller scale, right? I let them know they can't fully support their kiddo and constantly give to others without taking care of themselves first. Yep. It's that concept of like the plane, right? And I know you guys know this, it's still one of my favorites. But, when you're in a plane, you got to put that mask on you first before you can help anybody else. I love the assignment of finding their own therapist. Agreed. That is definitely a huge suggestion. In a lot of these treatment programs, they do get some family therapy. But in some programs, that family therapy will end when they graduate, when the identified person or loved one graduates from that program. And so they need to continue that. Go to your favorite store by yourself. I love that. My self-care is going grocery shopping with headphones, listening to music, and just going grocery shopping and listening to music with my headphones on. Yep, I love the analogy of the two trains side by side. They're in one and the client is in the other, not in the same train. Have something to look forward to, no matter how small. I think that is huge. It can be a simple thing, taking 10 minutes, being really intentional about what you're doing with regard to that self-care, right? It doesn't have to be this grandiose, go get a mani-pedi spot. Nope, it can be simple. Have a cup of coffee, be very mindful about it, sit, and take 10 minutes to yourself. Yep, the seek support groups, a therapist, movement activity, yep, classes, Zumba, yoga. Yes, Amy, I love you. Show them, be a role model, model the behavior that you want to see in your kid. I talk about that all the time, how I'm going to help myself because that's important. And I'm going to, I'm going to role model the behavior that I want to see in you as well, right? Sleep, definitely a big one. Make that doctor appointment you've been putting off and take a walk. So you help them in helping them remain accountable with specifics for actual activities. I love that. We have those accountability challenges in my parent support group as well, right? Like where we're like, all right, we're going to check in with you next week, see if you did that self-care we suggested. And then we can talk about like those barriers, like what got in the way, what prevented you from being able to do that. Movies, walks, cook, and then process it. How did it feel? Oh, thank you, David. Adele Faber is the author of How to Talk So Kids Will Listen. Appreciate the support in that. These are all great suggestions. And again, it is a concept that I think is really lost in parents who have, or families who have a loved one struggling with mental health or substance use, but it's just so important. Again, trying to be really mindful of time. So one of the evidence-based treatments for families, and this is specific to the family. So this is not this is a community reinforcement and family training or craft is oftentimes used with someone who's in the contemplation stage of good. I think it really kind of encompasses so much of the stuff that we've already talked about. But it's influencing that change with positive reinforcement. I always talk about like catch them being good, right? Like we want to come from this loving space. That's why that book like of How to Talk So Kids Will Listen also reinforces this a lot. I think one of the big takeaways that I see with the families that I work with is that you can live a happier life whether or not your loved one is abstinent. So that is huge. So again, CRAFT is a program for families. It's good practice for those refusing treatment. You want to reinforce the positive behaviors. The underlying principle of CRAFT is that in order to change someone else's behavior, you must first change your own, which again is that overarching theme that we've been talking about. In CRAFT, you allow those, again, natural consequences. This is, again, recognizing a lot of those patterns, changing how you interact. So it really is just reinforcing a lot of what was discussed in that BSFT. You can help families with in CRAFT, they help families recognize like when they can assist. Like, so, if their person is actively using, that's not a time to go in and talk about, like getting into treatment or things like that. I always talk about it in this way with families, that it is, them creating these opportunities, right? Opening doors and allowing their family member to walk through them. So you open the doors, you can't push them through that door, but you can open the door and help them walk through them. CRAFT is also a space when we have that small window of willingness by utilizing CRAFT. When that person is ready to get help, like you've already set the stage so that they will come to you and ask for that help. And it's way more complicated than this, so I apologize in terms of minimizing it or just kind of making it so simple. But I think if you don't know about CRAFT, you should learn about CRAFT because it, again, is just another great tool to help support families. I think also education when helping families. So there is obviously, helping families understand the disease of addiction or substance use disorder. I think for some families, especially if their kids have been using for so long, I have a person in my parent support group that's been coming for 8 years. So they have seen the trajectory of their loved ones' use, but recognizing how like the use in adolescence, how it impacts what happens in adulthood and how it changes their brain. Continuous use of marijuana from the age of 13. And when that person is 26, they don't have that same brain, right? Their brain has been altered or changed. So helping them understand the disease of addiction, I think it can also help families understand that it's progressive, right? And we can intervene, we can interrupt it. I love talking about the disease of addiction. I think it's great. I always talk about it in terms of symptom management. I talk about it in terms symptom management in terms of mental health as well, right? So we all know that, there are certain symptoms with regard to substance use disorder. There are certain behaviors that we see across the board, right? It's again, like when you're sitting in a group or you're hearing others kind of talk about their use, it's like, yeah, they were dishonest. It impacted, it was impacting their sleep. They had an increase in mental health, getting difficulty getting out of bed, stop showering, these kinds of things. So recognizing those kind of symptoms of their substance use disorder, Reference has a little handout if anybody's ever interested in it, that just really kind of points out what some of those symptoms are. But I think talking about the disease of addiction, talking about them in the sense of symptoms, and then we can talk about them in terms of some symptom management as well. Obviously, the added support, I can't stress that enough. Oops, sorry. And then a huge one, and we're always working on this, right? Like reducing the stigma around it. And I think that that's where those support groups come in. Somebody mentioned the parallel process, like the metaphor of the train. There is also a great book called The Parallel Process. And I will update my slides to indicate who the authors are, but The Parallel Process is also another great book to pick up. My families read it. It really is all about having the parent get help recognizing their own patterns, their contributions to the, again, they're loving, they're attempting to be loving. Oh, sorry, reading the comments. I'll go back to that. Attempting to be loving in, attempting to be loving, but actually contributing to the illness as opposed to the wellness. But that is a great book to assign if you ever really need that. Okay. So again, the roller coaster, it's the highs and lows. I think that again, normalizing these highs and lows for families, helping them helping them work through them is huge. It's one of the reasons why I love FRC and work with them so well, is because they do some heavy lifting, not only with their kiddos, but with their parents as well. And so I just really appreciate being here and having FRC allow me to be a part of this presentation. And just again, to be mindful of time, I am open to questions. I love, David, the comments about the condition. I will change that language as well. I like that. And then Jennifer has a great suggestion of the, yes, so I always suggest that as well with regard to support groups, because there are some times when people are like one and done. I did not get anything out of that. So that's always the first thing I say when individuals want to attend my peer support group. Listen, if this did not work for you, that's not the end of it. Please try some of the other groups, right? And then, yes, we definitely point out that there are some dysfunctional groups, or there are, right, bad nights. I love that. I agree wholeheartedly with you. Finding a great one can change lives. So I would love if you have great groups that you are aware of, if you would put those in the chat and we can share those to recommend to the families that we work with. And Kristen came to the rescue there. That book is Chrissy Pazatek, and it is really a great book. Any other questions?
Maria, I think, oh, I'm sorry, there is one question. Is your family program open to clients who are not in the treatment program?
Yes, so it is, because again, it's just a support group. So I can, basically, you would contact me if you wanted anybody to attend the group. So we have two groups that run. I facilitate the one specific to parents, and that meets Thursday nights virtually. And then we have one on Saturday that also meets virtually, and that's for families, so spouses, siblings, things of that sort. And the age range for the families that I deal with, they vary. So they can be, 13-year-olds, but I also have parents in there who have 28-year-olds. Smart Recovery for teens, that is a good one. I love Smart Recovery groups. I know of some great ones. Unfortunately, I think that they're closed, but there are great Smart Recovery meetings for families. Dana, how do I put my stuff in the?
So I think you can just type it right into chat, and also everyone will receive an email with the PowerPoints and Maria's contact info as well. So you will receive that afterwards, but I do believe you could just type it right into the chat to everyone.
Okay. So how we have families join my group is they can just email me, and then what I send them is a blurb of kind of some of the rules. And then once they kind of agree to the rules, obviously it's this is a judge-free space. This is, kind of the format of it, but basically it's just, this is a safe space for people to share. So I did put my information in the chat. And then I send them the link, and it is a continuous group, so they can come one time. They can, they can come every week if they want, but there is no commitment to it, and they do not need to be. They don't need to be in any type of Rosecrans services. Do we have specific groups for kids or parents struggling with substance use disorder? So Rosecrans does. We have a number of groups that are, actually no. So I think I'm not understanding the question. Do you have specific groups specific for kids of parents struggling with substance use disorder? We do not. I know of a really great one through Hazelden though, and it's free. I don't know if there's anybody from Hazelden on here, but they have a really amazing program. It's a weekend program, and they go from little to older, but it is a really great, amazing program. Dana, I'd be happy to send you the information that I had. I don't know again, if it's changed this, during COVID, they offered it for, I feel like they're going to let it stay. But again, it is free and open to kids of parents struggling with substance use disorder. They do a brief assessment to make sure that it's appropriate, but I think it's like a closed kind of group process. Might be a few sessions, but it is, yeah, it's a great program. Jennifer, thanks for the Families Anonymous, Naranon. Oh, look, and then yeah, FRC has one. So Amy asked, what do you recommend for family that lost loved ones to substance use disorder? I mean, that's huge. I, again, have some contacts with, as we were talking about smart recovery, I have, you know, and there is, Lift for Lolly has, you know, their Angel Mom group. I think that that's a really good one. I'm not 100% certain what the status is of that. And again, I know of smart recovery meetings that also kind of have those Angel Mom groups. I could probably try and get some specifics for that. I think, you know, and I've worked with a lot of parents who have lost ones to substance use disorder. And I think that power of those, the power of, I mean, that's just a special kind of group. So Amy, I can probably get you that information or work with Dana to get you some of that information. And then there is a chat for Path to Recovery in DuPage County, Gone Too Soon, Fox Valley Hands of Hope. I am not familiar with those, so I appreciate that. Compassionate Friends and Bereaved Parents of America. Those are good ones as well. Any other questions? Am I missing?
It looks like you've answered them all. And Maria, I just want to say thank you so much. I feel like this has been, I think it's such an important focus on the family system and looking at, you know, all the different dynamics and roles, and also the sharing of resources is amazing. So I love, you know, obviously the 2 books, we incorporate those as well. Sometimes we even incorporate books into our actual programming where we might read chapters with the parents to really kind of hone in on it. So thank you for that. There is a question, is there a survey eval for CEU? So all the information for your CEU for this will be emailed to you afterwards. So you will get, you know, instructions on how to get the CEUs, the survey or the evaluation, and then the PowerPoint as well. And as Maria said, we'll attach some of these resources that she was talking about so that you have access to those as well. And I think with that, that is all. Maria, thank you so much. So helpful.
Yeah, no, thank you guys for having me. I really, really appreciate it. And I thank everyone who joined today and their contribution. Like, it's huge, right? Like, we don't want our families to do this alone, but we clinicians don't have to do this alone either. So I so appreciate the resources from across, like the DuPage County one, super helpful because I don't do a lot in that area. And so it's great. Thank you so much. Dana and Ryan, thank you so much for having me. Again, super grateful.
Absolutely. Yeah, thank you. All right, everyone, enjoy. Oh, Maria, you rock. We'll leave with that one. I love it. All right, guys, enjoy your Wednesday.
Thanks so much.
Bye-bye.
Bye.